Welcome to Tangi's Tapestry, where spirituality, law, motherhood, and relationships weave into a rich and meaningful discussion. I'm your host, Tangi, a mother, daughter, sister, friend, and an avid entrepreneur. Join me as I share my personal journey, explore faith-based discussions, and offer valuable legal insights. Each episode is designed to inspire, empower, and connect with individuals on their unique path. So let's dive into today's topic and embark on this journey together. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Tangi's Tapestry. I'm your host, Tangi, and I am so excited that you have tuned in for episode number 4. We have 6 more episodes to go before the season closes out, and I am just so thankful that my listeners have continued on with this journey with me through my very first podcast channel. And I'm going to be completely 100% authentically honest with you guys. There are some days that I just don't want to do the podcast. And I think a lot of it is because behind the scenes, it's a lot of work. And I'm doing it all by myself right now. I'm starting out on my own. I create my own cover podcast our podcast covers. I mix and whatever you want to call it, master my audio. I I upload things that sometimes don't want to upload. It's a lot of work. But I know that there's a purpose behind what I'm doing. And I've always been told when you feel like you don't want to do something, that's even more reason for you to do it. So I'm just thankful that you guys continue on with me on this journey and that you guys are supporting me. So when I see people posting my podcast or sharing it, it definitely um, it makes me feel much better about what I'm doing, and it helps me to be motivated to keep going. But nevertheless, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I know that there's purpose behind this, and God has called me to do um, this podcast channel. So, um, let me go ahead and jump right into episode number 4. Last episode, I spoke about estate planning, and I'm kind of keeping on the topic of that in this episode. I mentioned, in that episode about how important estate planning is and how everyone, no matter how young or old, well, you have to at least be 18, be an adult, to do some estate planning stuff. But no matter where you're at in your stage of life, you really should consider doing an estate plan for yourself. And so in this episode, I wanted to focus more on the living trust because I think a lot of times we put a lot of focus on making sure everybody, has a will, and that's a very important tool and document. But I often get questions from clients about the trust, and they don't really fully understand what the trust is or how it works or if they really need one. I have some clients that'll say to me, well, I don't really think I need a trust because I don't have anything to put into the trust. I don't, so I don't have a lot of assets or money or all this stuff, which is a common theme among estate planning anyways, is people just don't think they have anything to offer to do a estate plan. So, but hopefully this episode just sheds a little bit of light on the the documents of a trust. And again, you guys, please give me a little grace today. I haven't been feeling well for these past few weeks. I'm on and off, just not feeling the greatest, under the weather. And so, like, I have a little bit of a foggy brain. So if I fumble my words or I forget what I meant to say, just extend me just a little bit of grace. Don't judge me. I assure you, you know, I won't always be like this, but there are some days I'm just there's we have our off days, right? And today happens to be one of them, but I need to get this content put out, and so here we are. So, but before I do begin with the episode, I do want to give my disclaimer that the information shared in this episode is general legal information. It's not intended to be like, specific legal advice for your situation. So if you do, desire to have specific legal advice provided to you, you should contact a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. I'm licensed in Maryland and DC. So if you have additional questions for me that are specific in nature, feel free to reach out. I also will answer any general questions. Just understand I wouldn't be able to give you legal advice if you're not a resident of Maryland or DC. Okay. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into how we can build your legacy and ensure your family's future security with using a trust. And in each episode, I always kind of try to lead with a scripture from the Bible because I do believe that it sets the tone. And I do find that everything in our lives is tied or connected to the Bible. Like you can find something that you're going through, you can find a story in the Bible or a scripture that can give you some guidance and some direction. So, um, if you do have your Bible, you can turn with me to Proverbs 21 and 5. Um, and, I'm reading from the New Living Translation. So in Proverbs 21 and 5, it reads that God, see, there y'all go. I need that grace. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. So I like this scripture because it reminds us that, you know, the plans of the diligent surely will lead to prosperity. Um, but anyone who is acting in haste or cutting corners or trying to take shortcuts or you're not planning at all, that could lead to poverty. And this scripture speaks to the importance of diligent planning, much like what's needed for creating proper estate planning, so that you're ensuring that your family's future is secure and that you're leaving you know abundance and prosperity behind to your family. So I love this scripture. I love how it kind of connects with today's topic. So with that, I wanted to start with talking about like what is a trust and how it's different from a will. So, a lot of times, when you're dealing with estate planning, the will is at the forefront of everything. Like that's heavily talked about. Um, and so, you know, I wanted to share with you like the difference of a will versus a trust, and then, also explain what like the trust is. So I think I just said that, but I'm repeating myself. So when you create a trust, when you create a will, it takes effect after your death. So you'll put all the stuff all your wishes and everything inside of the will, and then you put it away. Nothing happens with it until you pass away. And then even when you do pass away, nothing is automatic. Like all of your assets and whatever you've put in that will, nothing starts being distributed to anybody until someone takes your will and puts it through probate. And that someone should be your executor, who you listed in the will, and you've let them know that you had a will. So once you pass away, then that's when your will goes through probate, and then at that time things start getting distributed to people, your beneficiaries. And so this whole process of the probate process is very time consuming and expensive. And a lot of times, people don't even understand really what the probate process is. And so, what that is it's just a legal process where when someone dies, to ensure that their debts are being paid and their assets are being distributed, then the courts will oversee all of that and make sure that everything is done, in order and the way that you had it to be laid out in your will. Now, they also want to make sure that the will is valid. So that's another part of the process. But overall, the probate process is just making sure debts and taxes and assets are going well, debts and taxes are paid and assets are going to the beneficiaries. And so if you die without a will, it's the same process. It's just that you're dying, that this I'm sorry, the state is the one that's going to be controlling where all your stuff goes at that point because you didn't have a will. So the probate process is very, like I said, time consuming. It can cost a lot of money depending on your estate. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people want to avoid the probate. And so they start thinking about a trust. Um, and so, like, what is a trust, right? Like, one, you want to understand what a trust is. And it's really just a legal document that it consists of an agreement or an arrangement where, one person who is the grantor, which would be you, the person who's getting their trust created, you're going to give legal ownership of specific property. Um, you're going to put it into this trust, and then the second person, who's the trustee, is going to hold and manage the property, so that it can be used for a third person, which is the beneficiary. So you're dealing with, three different individuals. You have your grantor, then you have your trustee, and then you have your beneficiary or beneficiaries if you have more than one. So the big difference between the trust and the will is that a trust is going to take effect during your lifetime. So it's like a living, breathing document that's actually that's that you can do stuff with it while you're still alive. Whereas, the will, once you create it, it just gets put to the side, and none of your assets or nothing is done with any of that stuff until you pass away. And then another key distinction between the will and the trust is that with the will, you have to put it through probate. With a trust, it does not go to probate. And so it's a way to avoid probate by having that trust. And so the way I like to look at it in more of a simple way to look at it is, like, think of a trust like it's a box, right? And you have all of your stuff, all of these assets, and you're going to put it into this box while you're alive. And then those assets can be managed for you or your beneficiaries, because you can be the beneficiary in your trust, or you can have other people be your beneficiaries as well in your trust, and there's no court involvement. So it's just a really, it's a tool that can be utilized to, keep the courts out of your business. All right. So that is what a trust is. Now, what makes a trust valid is that um, you have to have a few things in place in order to have your trust to be, considered valid, in the event that it needs to, I don't know, be disputed in court or whatever. But nevertheless, your trust has to have a few things to be valid. So you want to have the intent, um, which is, the person who's going to be creating the trust, which is the grantor, you have to have a clear intention that you're creating a trust. So your document needs to have the right language and the right, you know things in there, like your trustee and your beneficiary and all that stuff, which I'm going to go through in a second here, in order for there to be the intent that you're actually intending to create a trust and not some other document, right? And so you want to also have capacity to enter into this document. So the grantor, you must have the mental capacity to understand the nature and the consequences of establishing a trust. And I think that's like one of the key essential things with any estate planning document, is that you want to make sure you have the mental capacity, that you're in your right mind, you know exactly what you're doing, nobody's forcing you or coercing you into creating these documents. And so having mental capacity is really huge, in making sure that documents for estate planning are valid. Another item that you want to make sure that you have in your trust is that you have definite beneficiaries. So the trust definitely has to specify who the beneficiaries are, whether it's one beneficiary, you, or other beneficiaries. Although there's some exceptions when you're dealing with like charitable trusts, but for general speaking, for your non-charitable trust, you want to make sure that you list beneficiaries, and during your lifetime you want to make sure that that there is at least one primary beneficiary in that trust, because if you don't have any beneficiaries in the trust, then it could call into question the validity of the trust. And so the trustee is going to manage the trust property for the benefit, in accordance with the trust agreement for the beneficiary. Now, upon your death, however, the trust agreement is going to act like a will, and it's going to provide the distribution of your assets to your beneficiary. So, as long as you transfer your assets into this trust before your death, then those assets don't have to go through probate. So, just again, make sure that you have some beneficiary or a beneficiary listed. And if you're just listing yourself as the beneficiary and you pass away and then you have no other beneficiaries in there, then that might raise some validity concerns of your trust. Now, another item that you need in the trust is the trustee. And I don't know why I keep saying like the item, but another thing you need to have in your trust is a trustee. And so the trust must appoint a trustee to manage the trust assets. So the trustee is, it can be you. You could be the truster. You could be the trustee, and you could be the grantor, and you could be the beneficiary. But the thing is that um, that's only good during your lifetime. So you also need to make sure that you have a successor trustee in the event that you become incapacitated, or that you pass away. So always make sure that if you are going to list yourself as the trustee, that you have a successor trustee listed also in your trust. And then as far as the trust property, you that's one of the essential things that you have to have. You must hold some type of property or assets in your trust, so that because that's the whole purpose. The whole purpose is to have is to put the property in there. If you don't put any property inside of your trust, then it's probably going to fail. So you want to make sure you have some property or some type of asset placed in the trust, so that it can be managed under the terms of the trust agreement. And then, as far as it being a written document, now there are some instances where you can have an oral trust that's valid, but I would always highly suggest that your trust be in a written document, especially if you're dealing with like real estate assets of that nature. You want to make sure that you have a written document, because this is going to ensure that it's made with clarity and it's enforceable. So again, my that's just me. I always advise clients to have a trust in written format. Now, as far as the types of trusts that are out there or available, and this may not be the full list of trusts, but these are the most known types of trust. There's your revocable living trust. And what a revocable living trust is, it's a trust that can be altered or revoked at any time during your lifetime. So it definitely provides some form of flexibility and control over your assets when you have a revocable living trust. The opposite of that would be a irrevocable trust. And in the irrevocable trust, this is once it's established, these to make a change to it is very difficult to do. So it's not easily changed like you can in the revocable trust. So often the irrevocable trust is used for specific tax benefits and asset protection. And then you have your special needs trust, which is designed to benefit individuals who have like disabilities that might be affected. So like what and let me rephrase that. So if you have a special needs trust, it's going to help if you like dealing with someone who's on like government benefits, and you want to make sure that their benefits aren't affected, like their eligibility is not affected. So you want to create this type of special needs trust for those individuals. And then for your charity trust or charitable trust, you're going to use this to benefit like a charity or some type of um, public entity, because it's going to provide you with some type of tax benefit to the donors. And then lastly you have your testamentary trust, which is created through like a will, and that only comes into effect after death. So those are the different types of trusts that are available. But again, the most common trust, like I said, is the revocable trust, and that's the one that's easiest to change or you know alter or make modifications to. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how a trust works. To create a trust, typically you're going to draft a trust document. And that's going to entail where you, the grantor, it is going to be transferring assets into this trust. And so you'll also make sure that you've named your trustee, because that's going to be the person that's managing the assets. And then you're going to have to name those beneficiaries who are to receive the assets. So that's pretty much how you're going to be creating the trust. And again, like I think I mentioned before, you could be the trustee, you could be the beneficiary over those assets, during your lifetime. But again, you're going to want to make sure you're listing a successor trustee, and you're going to make sure you're listing other beneficiaries who can inherit the assets that you've put into that trust upon death. Because again, if you don't put a successor trustee in there and you don't list a beneficiary in there, then you're going to have some, issues that arise with your trust, and it might end up causing the trust to not be valid anymore if it's missing um those individuals in there when you go on to glory. Okay, a better way of saying it. A lot of times I hate to say when you die because it sounds so morbid, but at the end of the day we're all going to pass away one day. We all have to leave this earth, and so um it is what it is. But I try to make it, not sound as morbid. Okay. And then the management piece of the trust, that's where this trustee comes into place. And so what the trustee does is they have a fiduciary duty to just make sure that they're managing the trust assets in the best interest of the beneficiary. So they're acting on behalf of the beneficiaries, whether that's you or some other individuals that you have listed in there. They are not to be doing anything that's to benefit them. And so you want to make sure that the person that you list as your trustee is somebody that you actually trust, which is, why they're the trustee. So, and this just simply means that, like your trustee is going to manage the assets according to the terms of the trust. And then, those assets are going to be distributed to the beneficiaries, either while you're alive or after you've passed away or even become maybe incapacitated. So, and all of that will be specified in the trust. So all of, the management piece of it and how everything is supposed to go, you're going to lay all of that out inside of your trust. Okay? And so that's kind of just how the trust works. You have it created in the document, you list out who your, you know, um trustee beneficiaries are, what your trust property is that's in there, how it's supposed to be managed. And that's really just it. I mean, it doesn't sound complicated, but when you have a lot of assets and a lot of different stuff, that's where the complexity comes in at when actually creating it. Okay. And so, another thing that I wanted to talk about with the trust is, you know, how do you know if a trust is right for you? Um, and I think really in when you're dealing with creating an estate plan for yourself, you really need to sit down and think about what goal is it that you're trying to achieve for yourself and for your loved ones. And so when you're able to answer those questions, then you have a fundamental understanding of what estate planning documents you might need in your estate plan. So, with the trust, these are just some things that I think that clients, when they're thinking about whether or not they want to do a trust versus a will, these are some things that I think that they consider. Um, which is not a conclusive list or whatever, but it's just a few of the things that I think is worth noting. So, one of the key things, like I mentioned early on, is avoiding probate. Um, like I said, when you have a will and you pass away, that will has to go through probate. It's nothing automatic about it. You can't start passing out stuff based on, what the will says. It has to go through court. You have to take that will there and the court has to get involved. With a trust, it helps your family to avoid, the time consuming and costly probate process. Um, and then it also leads to like a faster distribution of your assets to your beneficiaries. So without having the court involved, it's is one of the major reasons why people go with a trust. Another key issue, I think that people choose a trust over like will is because unlike wills, a trust is a public I mean, a trust is not a public document. Let me repeat that. A trust is not a public document, whereas a will is. So, like, I can actually go and pull up people's wills that have been probated, and I can see all of the stuff that they have put in their will, um, you know, to where things are supposed to go. And then the whole, process of what's been filed and all that stuff, people can just view that stuff because it's all public documents. Um, but a trust, it definitely will keep your affairs private. So, like, if you're someone with a lot of assets and you have a large estate and you don't want people all in your business, especially if you're going to be giving beneficiaries a ton of assets like money and property and all kinds of stuff, right? And you don't want people to know what they have or what you've given to them, then that's when a trust comes into play. So it definitely is good for privacy reasons. And then you have, excuse me, I'm going to drink a little bit of water, you guys. I have been kind of battling, like not feeling good on and off for a couple of weeks. So just have to have a little bit of water. um, another thing that I think people consider a choosing a trust over a will is because it offers a lot more control and flexibility over your assets. So for example, if you have like minor children or beneficiaries with special needs, then the trust that you create can be very specific in how and when those beneficiaries are to receive their inheritance. So it definitely ensures they're financially protected. And I like to think of like life insurance. So, like, not often should you put your life insurance in a trust. Like, you really don't need to put it in a trust, but like, let's say you have minor children, right? And you have a life insurance policy that's a significant amount of money that's to be left, and one thing I will say is that when you're dealing with life insurance policies, and this is a small little caveat away from the topic, but you shouldn't put your minor children as beneficiaries over your life insurance policy. And I could go into great detail about why you shouldn't do that, but I'm not going to. But you just shouldn't, right? So, um, you may, you might, put another adult as your beneficiary on your life insurance policy, and you hope that that person that you put on there, follows your wishes and takes care of your minor children with that money. However, there's nothing that legally binds them to do that. Like, so if I, listed someone, I have a minor, I have a minor child. I have two adult kids and a minor child, right? And, if I list my adult daughter on my life insurance policy, I know she would take care of her sister. But if I listed somebody else, that person could take all that money that I have in a life insurance policy and go shopping. They can go, travel the world. They can do all these things with that money. And there's nothing anybody can do to them. However, if you were to take your life insurance policy and you listed you listed the beneficiary as your trust, um and put that inside of, put that life insurance policy in your trust, then you could dictate how that money is to be spent upon your death. So you could say, you want all this, you want your child's education to be paid for with this money or whatever. So that would be a good reason, as to why you would have a trust, is to control, to have more control and flexibility over the assets you put in there. And like I said, I listed the life insurance, because that's one of the examples as to why somebody might want to create the trust. And again, you don't have to have a life insurance policy and put it in your trust. I don't always recommend that. I think it's good when you have minors or someone with special needs. Okay. And so that is one of the reasons, control and flexibility, you're able to dictate how the money is to be spent. Whereas when a will, you put your assets in there and people can do as they wish with whatever you gave them, because there's no more control after that. There's no more oversight once they get the asset when it's given to them through the will. All right. And so another reason for a trust is asset protection. So there are certain trusts that can protect assets from creditors and legal claims. I'm not going to go into all the detail about those trusts, but there is definitely some asset protection as to why people do a trust versus a will. There's also some tax benefits. So, if you're trying to take advantage of, or if you're trying to have significant tax advantages, I shouldn't say take advantage of the tax, but if you are trying to have, some tax advantages and you do have a large estate, then you definitely want to maybe consider, looking into the benefits of a trust. And then another reason people do trust are for incapacity type of issues. So, a trust can ensure that like your assets are managed according to your wishes if you were to become incapacitated. So it's going to provide management of those assets, in the event that you're not able to do it yourself. And then it's going to avoid you having to have someone go to court and get like a guardian or a conservatorship over you, your person, or your property. So if you have a living trust, you could appoint, a successor trustee. And then if you became incapacitated, then the successor trustee is going to be able to step in and manage your trust assets on your behalf without the court intervention. So it basically will help to avoid having to set up a guardianship. Um, so, like, if you didn't have a trust, then you would have to go through court, and then the court would have to appoint like a guardian or a conservator to manage your affairs. And this can be like a lengthy process, and it can also cost you can cost you money or the other person money to try to have to file to get a guardianship or a conservator to step in. But a trust would help to avoid all of that, um, and it would definitely outline how to manage your assets if you were to become incapacitated. So that successor trustee can go in and like do things like pay your bills, manage your investments, handle any financial matters that you may have. And of course, there's also a power of attorney, a financial power of attorney that can do the same thing. But a trust sometimes, you can have a little bit more, uh what's the word I'm looking for? There's a little bit more that goes into the trust, versus the financial power of attorney, but either one would act the same, right? And this just ensures that there's like no disruption in managing your financial affairs. So that's why some people will also get do a trust. And then you're dealing with like privacy issues like I explained before. Your trust document is confidential, and you're not going to have to go through a court. If you become incapacitated, you're going to have to go to court, and you're going to have to or you're not going to go to court, but someone else is going to go to court on your behalf, and they're going to have to put all this stuff out in the public. And so it's probably a good idea, to consider, like setting up that trust. Or, like I said, there's also the financial power of attorney, but we're talking about the trust. So, and then, healthcare decisions, uh, with a living trust, that primarily handles your financial matters, it can also work in conjunction with like a healthcare power of attorney or an advanced medical directive, because it ensures that like all the aspects of your care are going to be covered and managed. And so those are just some things to think about when it comes to incapacity issues, like when you become incapacitated and then you're not able to you know act on your behalf anymore. So again, y'all, give me a little bit of grace. I'm not I'm just struggling here to like try to keep my words from not getting all jumbled up, but y'all get the point. So that's pretty much the ins and outs of a trust, just the general overview of it. So, how a trust works, what types of trusts are available, and, like, again, I think the biggest thing with the trust that most people focus on is that it avoids that whole probate process. And so, like I mentioned early on, once you understand and you can identify like your goal, like what is it that you're really trying to achieve in your estate plan, that's going to really solidify like what type of estate documents you really need to put in place. So, as always, I'm thankful that you guys were able to join me on this episode of Tangi's Tapestry. Today we definitely took a deeper dive into living trusts, and then, understanding like their benefits and, how they can help secure your family's future. Um, so from things from like avoiding probate to protecting your assets, I think trusts they offer numerous benefits that can provide, like your family peace of mind, and as well peace of mind for yourself. And, I just go back to Proverbs 21:5, how it reminds us that, diligent planning definitely leads to abundance and prosperity for your family. So you do the work to benefit your family. And so I just encourage you to consider, maybe how a living trust might fit into your estate plan. Doesn't mean you have to get one, but I do think that when you just look at your overall you know, assets and what all you have and what your goals are, I definitely think that, it's a document that might actually work for you. And then just remember that it's never too early to start planning for your legacy. I I don't want to say it's never too late because, you know, once you die, then it is too late. Or once you become incapacitated and you can't make decisions for yourself anymore, then it is too late to start planning. So I do think the earlier, the better. But it's not too late to start now. So if you have specific questions about your situation, please consult with a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. And if you do have any general questions about estate planning, you're free to, contact me. I won't be able to provide you any legal advice unless you live in Maryland or DC. But you know, I'm open to anyone that has questions about estate planning. And then just make sure to stay tuned to my next episode, where I'm going to try to continue to explore more ways to weave together faith, law, and life. And don't forget to subscribe to my podcast and share it with your friends and family. Even give me a review. It definitely helps put my podcast out there. Um, like I said, like this is, it's been a journey. And there's some days that I just be like, oh, I don't know, but I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going. And so, you can make sure to follow me on, social media for more updates. And, I am just, again, I said, I'm so thankful, like I said, that I'm grateful that I have the listeners tuning in. And so until next time, take care and be blessed. And hopefully I'll be feeling much better for episode number 5. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Tangi's Tapestry. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Monday, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more heartfelt discussions, personal stories, and valuable legal insight. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with your family, friends, and followers. Your support means the world to me as I strive to create meaningful content that inspires and empowers. Well, until next time, take care and remember to leave your own unique story into the tapestry of life. See you on the next episode of Tangi's Tapestry.